What's cracking, people? It's your man Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, representing high-level technicians, operating globally and beyond. So listen, today I wanted to respond to a viewer's request in terms of him wanting me to watch a podcast, and this was presented by the No Jumper podcast channel. And this particular podcast that he wanted me to take a look at was one involving a returning sort of presenter on that podcast named Sharp, and of course Blue Jasmine. Now I'll link below the breakdown that I did about Blue Jasmine's situation with what made her famous in these YouTube streets down below. But this particular podcast was interesting because it showed the mindset of women at various levels of the game. Now, the viewer's question centered around this: is it possible for a select man to mentor or train a diesel woman and refine her to become a 100 octane? Now, shout out to the Master Teacher BGS Itmore for the octane scale. And so, of course, the diesel grade on BGS's chart is the lowest, most unrefined of social positioning. And I totally agree with that from a social position. But for me, in my world, obviously coming from the diesel background, and for the purposes that I used it for with the seduction scriptures, I placed diesel on top above 100 octane because in my world, it is about seduction. And so at the top of the food chain would be the diesel because of their ability to use their talents, their assets, and their seductive prowess to get what it is that they want. Now, with the 100 octane, that is essentially the sugar babies. Those are the IG models or Victoria's Secret models, or the young, beautiful women who get flown out, treated like royalty for simply being young, effervescent, right, and beautiful, essentially. But women do mature out of the 100 octane space, and usually they revert back to whatever of the other octane grades, 92, 89, 87, and of course 85, depending of course on their upbringing and their behavior and what their sort of default setting is. I also did a video on that I will link down below, entitled "What Happens When a 100 Octane Comes Back to Earth." So in this episode of the No Jumper podcast, there are so many interesting themes that were running and playing out over the course of this episode, but the prominent theme was that Sharp and Blue Jasmine completely disliked each other. Okay, now I'm not sure if there was, maybe there were some low level tension, whatever, at some point. But as this podcast carried on, we saw how much Sharp really lost whatever little bit of respect that he had for Blue Jasmine. He gave her the benefit of the doubt going into this discussion, but because she let her ego, lead her decision making, and her emotions lead her decision making, she missed out on an opportunity to actually learn some really good game. Now, Sharp is somebody that I would classify as a diesel manager, but he is an outlier in that he was a part of the pimp lifestyle, but he was also off into some other ventures. But all of that is being translated into the presenter lifestyle. But he still has, access to certain networks. So he's an anomaly. And so in order to classify him socially, I would say he's an outlier. But in terms of Blue Jasmine, definitely still in the diesel realm. And I think I think the overall question was a good question. Can a select man convert a diesel woman into a 100 octane? So essentially, the question is, can a man who is on his path of masculine mastery mentor and cultivate the type of woman who has the raw material, the sex appeal, the beauty, the relative youth that a diesel has, and mold her into a 100 octane? The type of woman who can be flown out, the type of woman who can be shown things, and the type of woman who can get into spaces that the average woman and the exceptional man, most exceptional men, are not able to get in. A great example that Sharp kept bringing up was the case of Vistiviano and Donald Sterling. You know, she got access to multiple properties, multiple opportunities for income streams, vehicles, so many things. She was introduced to very exclusive spaces where she was in the presence of real movers and shakers, entrepreneurs, business owners, obviously at the level and echelon of the billionaire class. And she essentially fumbled the bag, because of some emotional sort of meltdown, wanting to expose Donald Sterling. Now, how you feel on that? What's your position on her attitude towards that? That's your opinion. That's your position. But I think that Sharp is very correct when he says that Vistiviano fumbled the bag, and in that she had the opportunity to establish her own network via the access that Donald Sterling provided for her. All she had to do was, live that 100 octane life, be demure, follow the rules, and ride it out to the end so that she can properly transition out of that 100 octane lifestyle with a nice retirement package. But she did not. She fumbled the bag, and lost all of those, goodies and prizes, and of course the access. What Sharp was ultimately trying to convey to Blue Jasmine, and let's just get into the back and forth for just a second. Okay, now in previous videos, that I've broken down the difference in the social and emotional development in girls versus the physical and logistical development in boys, and that translates and carries out over the course of a lifetime, basically, for the average man and the average woman. So the example is that the average teenage girl, the high school girl, has the social IQ of, if not greater IQ and ability to read a social scene than the average adult male. This is not to speak to his logistical prowess or his spatial capacity, but in terms of reading the suite of human emotions, in terms of reading the subtle nuances of a social scene, girls learn at younger ages when they sort of start to smell themselves, as the elder people used to say, and they get off into more socially geared activities, whereas the boys are still playing, team sports and climbing trees, or I guess now they're playing video games, but whatever. The point is this: Jasmine's defensive vocabulary, I think, was on full display here. The way that she tried to joust with Sharp in terms of trying to take him down in a pecking order, or attempting to attack his prowess, or using tactics that are just ad hominem, or trying to attack his social standing, or his intelligence, or his lifestyle choices that really do not speak to the man himself. Now, for the average man, she would have eaten him alive. Before a man of Sharp's caliber and his experience and the education that he received in the various spaces that he's traveled through, he knew how to instinctively dissect and cut through all of the bullshit that she had on full display. There was a moment in this particular podcast where you can tell that she had used everything in her arsenal to try to expose some would-be chink in Sharp's armor. And this is what I observed as being the point that Sharp lost all respect for, because she was not about her business. She was not about her hustle. She was not about the come up. She was really not about the game through and through. And he made several very, very clear and direct distinctions regarding the type of sex work he was involved in historically, with the pimping and the parties and the other sort of aspects of the game that were more true to life, in person, tactile, on the ground, out the mud, as opposed to Jasmine's brand of game, Jasmine's brand of quote unquote turning tricks, right? The virtual kind, the kind where you have an online avatar, the kind where you're sent cash apps, the kind where you're competing with OnlyFans model, which has a completely different set of skill sets, a completely different set of real world skills as opposed to artificial skills, setting up profiles and talking men out of whatever, $100, $500 or $2,000, as opposed to where Sharp came from, where those levels of operators moved around in spaces that would put them in line to actually physically interact with people who had the potential to change lives. And that was the biggest sort of takeaway between the difference of game styles and lifestyle types between Sharp and Blue Jasmine. He was articulating this. She was trying to rebuff it. It was getting, frustrating, because what he was giving her was lost in the translation and the showmanship of her trying to argue him down, trying to sun him in a sense, like he was not sophisticated enough to understand this new brand of trick hole relationship. And so the part where he used the example of V. Stiviano and Donald Sterling, I think may have gone over her head, knowingly or unknowingly, because when he kept giving her great examples of real game where she could walk away with an enterprise, walk away with a business, walk away with some revenue generating engine that could set her up and her children up for the rest of their lives, she acted like he didn't give her any game whatsoever. And she kept saying, well, what's the game? Well, what's the game? So when she kept repeating that, well, what's the game? You're not giving me game. It made me think that she actually wanted him to physically take her by the hand and show him a network of potential men or potential business owners or potential, she wanted to see his book of business so that she can, sort of walk into those spaces and cherry pick whatever she wanted. But she obviously was not worthy of such a position, because going back to the viewer's question, she had not been trained in order to handle or manage that level of sophistication within the space of true game. And so it was starting to disgust Sharp to the point where he just was like, give me a drink. He almost walked out on the interview. And I understood his frustration, in that all she had to do was sit down and soak in the game. All she had to do was prove that she was teachable, that she was coachable, that she was manageable. But what she did instead was prove what the modern woman's mentality is in terms of submission. There is no submission within the sort of purview of the average woman, especially the average woman of a Blue Jasmine's caliber, because we live in a society full of renegades, and they believe that the traditional vehicles of navigating and negotiating various environments and terrains, i.e. the headship or the leadership or the stewardship of a seasoned masculine master, is obsolete. And the current vehicle that allows or affords women of her caliber access to some spaces is the virtual vehicle, the internet, various apps, various websites, to whereas you presumably can have access to men of various calibers from all over the world. However, in order to truly realize a woman's full potential, she needs the one thing that comes natural to a man, especially a masculine master, and that is a mission, direction, guidance, leadership, stewardship, all of the things that come with a man who has orientation. He's properly aligned with his self-awareness. He's properly aligned with his self-worth. He's properly aligned with his path. And so when you have a woman who is on renegade time, her going after the bag is quite literal. Doing things for handbags, doing things for condos, doing things for a car, doing things for shoes, doing things for trips, not doing things to build opportunities that can be leveraged into something more substantial, something that means something that's legacy based. Because at the core of the woman is chaos, whereas at the core of the man is order. Again, the example that he used with Vistaviano and Donald Sterling was a great sort of show of how a woman has all these opportunities. She gets into an emotionally compromised position and she burns the situation to the ground. Another example is Brittany Renner. We can get to this case study in another video, but she had access to a multi-tiered, multi-level network with Colin Kaepernick. She did not have to vie for that number one spot, even though she was fully aware that Colin was involved with a Maine woman. She potentially had access to NFL level networking opportunities. What happened? Burned it to the ground. She literally she could have been an NBA wife. What happened? Burned it to the ground. All because there was no direction. There was no order. There was no mission. So at the end of the day, here's a response to this particular video. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. And as always, this is your man Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, saying, stay sharp and mission focused. Later.